Okay, good morning and welcome to our latest video recording from the buyer. This morning we've got to have a panel of buyers themselves from different parts of the on-trades. We're all going to be looking at premium Italian wine. Thanks to our partners today, which are Banfi, who are clearly at the centre of premium Italian wines, both in Italy and around the world. So to kick off, we're going to be looking at 4 different regions and how those areas are kind of good highlighting for Italian wines, and then explore where the opportunities are for super Italian wines in the premium on-trade. So to help this morning, I've introduced the panel. We have Diana Rowland, who's the group head of beverages at D&D London. Nacho Campos, who's the wine manager at Hawksmoor. Matt Pace, who's the operations manager at Enoteca De Luca. Donald Edwards, who's the head sommelier at La Trompette. Lucy Stewart, who's a prestige London account manager at Louis Latour Agencies, who actually obviously work with Banfi and import them into the UK. And joining us actually from Banfi, we have Igor Marini, who's the regional European manager. So we'll hear from Igor in a minute. But I just thought it'd be good actually if perhaps if I come to each of you in turn, really, just to sort of like just give us a minute on yourself, really, and where you fit into the world, and in particular, kind of how Italian wines, how important Italian wines are for your business. We're also actually joined by Melody Wong, who's the head sommelier at the Carlton Tower in Jeremiah in central London. So welcome to Melody as well. But perhaps if Dana, if I start with you, could you perhaps just give us a sort of a heads up on D&D London and how things are for you at the moment, and also just where Italian wine fits in with your group. You need to perhaps unmute yourself.
Sorry. For those who doesn't know, D&D is a collection of around 40 different restaurants across the UK. And so we have different styles of restaurants, from British to French, and we also have Italian restaurants part of our portfolio. One of the most famous restaurants is Sartoria, which is located in central of London, in Mayfair area. So for us, Italian wines are a key part of our range and quite popular choice by our consumers in general.
Well, it's okay. And can you give us a quick sort of like analysis of how things have been going for you since things have been able to open up again?
Well, since we reopened our doors, it's been quite positive, I must say. We were trading on a really strong basis, I think, because we also have very interesting venues where we combine outdoor space with indoors. So it was easy for us to, go back to levels similar to what we used to trade in Christmas time, which is a really, really a strong positive message from our customers coming back to our venues, and we've been fully booked almost since we reopened our doors, so it's quite positive.
Good. So I guess having that breadth of portfolio and different types of outlets has been a massive boost for you. Can I come to that, Matt? Now you're obviously you're with Enoteca De Luca. You're primarily an Italian business. So perhaps for those who don't know Enoteca De Luca, can you perhaps give us a sort of a heads up on what the business is?
Yeah, we're entirely, we've got a bit of a lower profile because we're entirely in the city. So pre-pandemic, we had 5 sites. Post-COVID, we're down to 3, and they're Liverpool Street, Guildhall and St Paul's. An Enoteca in Italy is like a wine bar that sells food, basically. It's privately owned, 2 owners, been going for about 10 years. The wine list is 95% Italian. If it was up to me, it'd be 100. kind of 2/3 red, 1/3 white, something like that in terms of the sales. Lots and lots from Tuscany and from the south. And I've been steadily trying to bring in more from Piemonte and Lombardia since I started. In terms of trade, we had one site open from as soon as we could in April, which is Devonshire Square, which has lots of outside space. And in those 5 weeks, you know, we broke every record we've ever had in terms of sales and covers and everything like that. And since then, I would say it's kind of been up 50% versus 2019, something like that. However, St. Paul's is probably down 50% versus 2019, and we're not even opening Guildhall yet. So it's very kind of a mixed picture. Customers still very much wanting to be sat outside is the kind of key determining factor. Yeah, that's us.
Yeah, well, we're actually recording this in the middle of the heat wave in London, so that's understandable why I want to sit outside. But yeah, it seems that the picture overall just is actually just so uncertain, isn't it? And just in terms of like not being able to predict from, well, weather-wise, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the business-wise, I mean, we're looking at another site. You know, we're not. There's so many opportunities in the city that, you know, I think if you've kind of got this far, then thinking about expansion is, I think a lot of people are doing it.
Excellent, thank you. Nacho, can I come to you and Hawksmoor now? Because you didn't actually open, did you, initially when from the first opportunities were open? Can you give us a heads up on Hawksmoor and where Italian wine sits within Hawksmoor?
Yeah, last year the restaurants had a staggered opening, and I am based in Guildhall, right next to Enoteca di Luca, actually. And last year, Guildhall was the last Hawksmoor to open. It was middle of September when we finally managed to open the doors. Well, we had to close back again, and we reopened in May. We have been very busy while we have been open. Not the last few days because it's very sunny and it's very hot, and most Hawksmoors are downstairs, their basement. So yeah, people definitely want to sit outside and get some sunshine. But it has been very busy. It has been very busy. And even though we have a wine list that it is very French focused, Italian wine always plays a big part on the menu, on the wine list. We do have from north to south a bit of everything in Italy, except from whites. It's mainly reds that sell. And I think that people like to have that holiday feeling when they're back in London, especially September and October. People come back to the restaurant thinking, I went to Tuscany on holiday. I wanna have a bit of that sunshine back in the table. Or they seem to remember their trips to Puglia, you know, whatever it is. Italy always has that holiday mindset to it, and the wines have that sunshine feel to it. So yeah, quite important bit of Hawksmoor.
Yeah, and is that level of familiarity and reassurance as well with some of those kind of classic Italian regions you mentioned there?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad we're gonna see a little bit of the off-piste as well. We have a tiny bit of that.
Yeah. Donald, can I come to you at La Trompette? How's things with yourself, and where does Italy fit in for yourselves?
Yeah, we're good. So we were a bit late coming out of the first lockdown, mainly because we needed to do a bit of DIY work in the restaurant, and our restaurant team was doing, and our maintenance team was redoing electrics in the kitchen at Shabrus. Ridiculous, silly reasons. But we've been very busy every time we've come back open. I mean, this time round, we had like 5-6 weeks of real peak Christmas levels of busy, you know, turning, you know, best, you know, up 10% on best week ever, like 3-4 weeks in a row. It was quite ridiculous. It's calmed down a little bit as people in Chiswick are finally going away on holiday. But I think we've really benefited from people not going into town. We picked up a whole host of businessy regulars who I feel were probably having their business lunches and business dinners somewhere central and are now just doing it close to where they live. As for Italian wines, Italy's always been a big part of our portfolio, probably slightly more Piedmont than the rest of the country, which I think reflects the fact that it's a love and passion of Nigel Platts-Martin, our director. So I've got a reserve cellar full of things that are just sitting, waiting to come ready to be pulled onto the wine list, and that's topped up year in, year out. Yeah, it's Italy in general, probably the second after France to being the most important part of the list. So that's a listing of probably about 50 wines, maybe.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, we'll come back and explore exactly what those kind of wines are and how well they're doing. Melody, can I come to you? It's obviously we're working with the hotel environment. At how can, if you perhaps give us a small introduction to yourself, and also just the kind of the range of Italian wines that you might have as part of the wider portfolio.
Absolutely. Sorry. Hello, everyone. I hope you hear me.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm in office right now. So I joined Jumeirah Cotton Tower since January, opening of, so it's located a nice bridge. So we are soon opening with our restaurant, Amari restaurant, which is an Italian modern twist. So we are organizing a wine list, which is around 350 bins. Mostly we'll focus on wine from Italy. So it's a combination of original style of wine, which is mean kind of small region, unique producer, but as well as some iconic, so some really nice and big name in a vertical way. So yes, hopefully open the hotel in this week, if not next week. So pretty much everything's ready. So I'm in office, I'm in my uniform. Quite exciting. We look forward to open our restaurant, which is around 80 covers.
Okay, yeah, well, I really appreciate your time this morning. Hopefully this is a nice distraction from all the stuff that's going on. And is your time in each of the outlets, or do you keep it across the many different hotels you have?
So
Is it the same
basically,
Italy?
I am the head sommelier and also the wine buyer for the whole hotel. So beside of Amara restaurant, which is one of our major focus, I also do wine buying for the other restaurants, Shimarsari, and as well as the rest of the hotel, including in-room dining and banqueting and so on. So it's quite a lot of wine across. The rest of the hotel will mostly focus more international selection. Amari is our flagship Italian restaurant. Obviously, most of the wine will be focused on from Italy.
Thanks. So actually, Lucy, can I come to you? If that's all right. Could you just in terms of from Louis Latour's point of view, where Italy kind of sits within your portfolio now, and what your kind of thoughts are around the opportunities for Italian wines?
So hi, I'm Lucy. I look after I look after all sorts actually in the company and lots of different trade sectors, but one of them is the prestige on trade. We took on Banfi, I don't know, Igor, about 3 years ago, I think it was now. So it was the first Italian addition to our portfolio, which is absolutely fantastic. But there are challenges just to have one Italian producer within the portfolio. But I would say the last 18 months have certainly been challenging from an on-trade perspective for me, because we do a lot of hotels, and I think that's the one that's been heaviest hit. So I don't have a huge amount of up-to-date information about, listings at the moment, because they're only just opening up again. But it's been great to have Banfi on board, and I'm learning a lot about Italian and the challenges involved, as well as the advantages of having it in the portfolio. So
brilliant. Okay, thank you. Well, that brings us on to Igor. Sorry for your patience. But we were just joking before we came on to the recording, but your background probably looks like that anyway, if you actually opened up your doors. But could you just perhaps introduce yourself, and for those who don't know Banfi, just give us sort of a short introduction on the winery and the business.
So welcome everyone. Thank you, Richard. I'm Igor Marini. I look after the European markets for Banfi, and I've been working for Banfi since 2012, so it's 9 years now. My background is I was born with a little drop of wine in my blood because I live in Verona and very close to the Valpolicella area, where we were used to drink a lot of wines in the past, and I would say still today. So I'm in the wine business since more than 20 years. So working as an importer in Austria, I got a wine shop in Verona where I live. Then I moved to Allegrini, a very famous Amarone producer in Valpolicella. And then I landed to Banfi, where I would say is maybe the best company I could land in. Indeed, Banfi is well known to be the leader producer of Brunello di Montalcino. We are based in Montalcino in the central part of Italy, in Tuscany, 2 hours inland driving from Rome. So in the middle of nowhere, but in a fantastic place for Brunello and for wines in general. So in the 78, the Mariani family started a business in Banfi, coming back from the US, where they already were working as an importer since 1919, so more than 100 years ago. And they started the business from scratch, just buying 3 little wineries existing. And it's nice to see that Brunello at that time was not as famous as it is today. Now Brunello is maybe the most famous Italian appellation, together with Barolo, Amarone, Barbaresco, Chianti, of course. But at that time, there were only 14 producers in the consortium, and Banfi was one of those. So we were, let's say, building the reputation of Brunello all around the world just by sharing the name Brunello with more than 90 countries that are actually where we are selling Brunello now. So the goal of the company since the beginning was to be sustainable in every action. So we are definitely following this kind of very ethical way of producing wine since the 78. And we're introducing a lot of pioneer innovation in agriculture and winemaking as well. We can go deeper, maybe talking about the wines, but in the end, the key card to understand Banfi is that all of the wines we produce must be definitely affordable in terms of pricing, but the highest quality possible in terms of course, winemaking. So still today, our entry-level wine as well as the premium are the best we can do in our property by following the rules of the environment and the nature and sustainable practices.
Thank you. And obviously your role into the developing business around Europe. I mean, you're just working with Louis Latour recently. So is the UK for you a key market to really develop?
Yes, definitely. And as Lucy said, it was not easy to get into a very famous English importer with just one Italian producer. I mean, that can be good from one side because everything is focused on you, but that can be a little bit difficult, challenging on the other side because, having 2 or 3 famous Italian brands in portfolio can help the sales of each other. And maybe you can go to the same clients with a little wider portfolio instead of just a brand. But what is very close to the Louis Latour style is that Louis Latour as a Burgundy producer is not far away in terms of philosophy of what Banfi is, and also in terms of dimension. So they are, I think, the biggest in Burgundy. We are the biggest in Brunello, and both appellations are made by very small producer with maybe 1 or 2 hectares average of property. And so what is distinguishing both and Louis Latour in Burgundy is definitely this kind of very, let's say, familiar attitude and style, even though the dimensions are very big. So to be in the UK is for us very important. UK is one of our crucial markets in Europe. So I would say that after Germany, UK has always been the most important. Germany is more for high volume sales and a little lower let's say, quality or price sales, while UK is definitely premium. UK is a showroom. Every wine from all over the world is in the UK. So to be there with a famous brand like ours and with the famous importers as well is absolutely crucial for our business in Europe.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, let's get stuck into the wines then. We're going to start with with Vermentino actually, but also use that as sort of a springboard to talk about the well, Italian wine, white wine offer in general. So, if perhaps Igor, do you want to introduce this wine? I mean, this is where it's from, and also the fact that there's the sort of maritime influence here, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So La Particola Vermentino is coming from the coastal region of Tuscany. So, and partly also with grapes coming from Montalcino. It's a native variety from Italy, Vermentino, coming especially from the seaside. So it's like a sailor. It seems like Vermentino can't stay far away from the sea. And indeed, the most, let's say, famous regions of production for this grape variety are Sardinia, Ireland, Liguria, and Tuscany. And the south of France as well, where Roll is more or less the same roots of grape. So Vermentino was born in Banfi, let's say 5 or 6 years ago. So it's one of the last wines we've done. It's a kind of a discovery because there was a huge demand for white wines in Italy. And the new style of drinking for the consumers has definitely changed from, let's say, also 10 years ago or even more. So we are now searching for native grape variety that are easy drinking with a kind of a semi-aromatic style and a very easygoing profile. So Vermentino is a style of reminding to floral hints of very fruity aromas with a kind of aromatic herb styles as well. But in the mouth is quite, let's say, creamy, very fat, I would say, due to the climate, because the coastal region is definitely very, very high climate. We have vineyards in places which are surrounded by mountains and which are nice, very nice differences, day and night temperatures or season from season temperature. And that's why acidity in this wine as well as aromas are very well preserved because of this. So Vermentino is also a very surprising grape variety that is aging extremely well, and in the long term is turning a little bit more so petrol style. I wouldn't say like Riesling, but almost like. And as soon as we launched the Vermentino, La Particola, we got a huge success in Italy first and all over the world afterwards, because it's definitely easygoing, easy to understand, but at the same time is definitely representing what an Italian white wine style should be, especially reminding about holidays, on what the people would drink in a beach terrace in the summertime with a nice seafood plate. So in the end, there's a lot in the Vermentino winemaking and agriculture, especially because it's difficult to keep this kind of fresh style wine in a hot temperature climate like we are. And finally, I would say is unoaked. No oak aging, is very simple, is very fruity, is very, let's say, easy to approach. And that's why we were running into the same category of Sauvignon Blanc style, Albarino, those kind of wines, easy for an aperitif, drink very cool temperature. And, you know, also, maybe it's not that correct, but I would say it's easier to drink than to explain. So that's why everybody loves it.
Okay, and just going to the panel, I mean, initial thoughts on Vermentino in general, and where this would sort of sit in terms of a typical style, or, you know, picking up on what Igor was saying there in terms of the maritime side of things. Any who would like to go first on that?
I think, yeah, this is pretty typical.
I would say for us, where's this priced?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I think Donald was good. Donald, you go first, and then Matt.
To be honest, I was going to ask the same thing from Matt about price-wise. It feels like quite, dare I say, like international style of Vermentino. There's some cool, like, fermentation esters going on, but very, very drinkable, and the kind of thing that, I mean, I've got a similar-ish wine on my list at the moment from Poggio al Tesoro, so I'm assuming this is going to be around the same sort of price, so fitting in at about 50-ish quid on the list. And it's a style of wine that works well. People like it. It has a little bit of name recognition, people do, I mean, obviously not quite to sort of Chardonnay Sauvignon level, but people do ask for Vermentino, or they do order it without being prompted, which is always a nice thing. But I think this does show that kind of lemon, saline, a little bit of kind of lemon barley water note that I always feel is very Vermentino-esque. So yeah, a very nice example.
Yeah. Igor, could you pick up on the price there, or Lucy, do you know the price of this wine?
Yeah, sorry, it sits about 50, you're right, £50 on the list.
Right. Okay. Matt, did you have a follow up in terms of like what you, in terms of Vermentino?
Yeah,
do you have those on your list and this particular style?
So, you know, one continuing problem we have is listing, you know, Italian whites above kind of 45 quid-ish on the list are always a bit more of a challenge. I would say generally for the whites we do sell, I mean, we've got a Vermentino from Mancini that was, I just looked and it was like our number 4 seller, but that's at a much lower price point. That's going to be about 34 on the list. And I would say as a general rule, our customers are looking for kind of bracing citrus acidity in Italian whites. And they're very scared of any kind of fatness or, you know, ripeness or sweetness, which I think this has, I mean, it's one of the things that makes it an interesting wine is I feel like on the finish, it gets a bit kind of richer and riper. So yeah, might be a bit tougher for us where, you know, acidity, that as I say, that kind of piercing acidity is probably the number one.
Yeah, the people's expectations, but yeah, it has got a real depth to it, isn't it? It's got a real length on it, still going on all the time in the mouth. I mean, Dana, is Vermentino a style that works with the D&D, or?
Yes, indeed. For us, Vermentino offers something different and unique, and another alternative, as Igor was mentioning, the profile of the wine is similar to those, you know, styles of popular Sauvignon Blanc. So, and because Vermentino is perhaps still so unknown, you can find super high quality wines at great value normally. It is always a welcome sight on the list, and it's for us it's a great variety that tend to be fairly priced as well as and also has a lot to offer in this particular wine. I think that it has plenty to say. You got that, you know, it's bursting with flavors. There is a lot of bright peach, pink grapefruit, and a touch of bitter almond at the end. But it also has a sort of a full body character too, that add texture into the wine. And when it comes to pair with food, I think it's really interesting. This is something that Italian has been doing really well. It's just impossible to think about Italian wines without put it in context with the food and make these wines really, you know, versatile when it comes to pair with food in general.
Yeah, this is very much a gastronomic wine, isn't it? It kind of like it cries out for something.
It does. I love that saline finish, saline edge that it has at the end, and it's just something quite unique and different. And I think white Italian wines are gaining in popularity, especially wines coming from indigenous grape varieties. There is a crave on the market right now for something different and unique, especially with younger consumers as well. So I think this could fit really well in a wine list.
Melody, can I ask you? I mean, is this a kind of style you think work well with your clientele?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say Vermentino is not really a secret for most of the wine industry colleagues, but I think for the market, it's still a grapes that needs time to introduce. Obviously, there's a lot of, I mean, I have many Italian colleagues, many of them are very familiar with the grapes, but I think for non-industry people, this is still a grapes that need to be introduced. I think many of the my guess, maybe their memory regarding of Vermentino is mostly with when they're traveling down south to the island to Sardinia. I think for Vermentino from Tuscany, it's kind of a new thing for many people. They'd be like, oh, like for some people, like, oh, they do white wine first of all, and second, like, oh, Vermentino, like how they make their journey to there. So it could be an interesting topic to speak for my company and with our wine list. Obviously we're looking for grapes from to able to show the terroir itself, to able to representing the region or something unique that can make a talk of the town. So this is what we've been looking for usually.
Okay, sorry, yeah, my internet just cut out right at the end there, so I apologise for the pause.
But you're reflecting very, very seriously.
I was reflecting, I know, yeah, don't worry.
You there, Richard.
If I reflect too much, no, sorry about that. Nacho, you're not reflecting. You're going to be speaking in a minute. Can I? Well, what do you think of the Vermentino, and is it a wine that you think will work with Hawksmoor?
It depends on the price point. We have a cheaper Vermentino from Sardinia, and like has been mentioned, it goes out without having to be prompted. People do recognize the name, and as well the maritime influence as well. So that lovely waxy texture in the palate, that kind of almond bittery finish to it. Very, very food friendly. At a higher price point, it would work if it's done by the glass. Then people might not always venture to have a whole bottle in a steak place. They always want just a bottle of red. But if you offer it by the glass, then yes, a tiny glass just to go with the starters is always a very food friendly grape, and I quite like the style of it. I like how versatile it can be with food.
Yeah, can I ask you, like, just in terms of the when you mentioned there about, perhaps coming back to you, Matt, you know, that idea of your customers looking for that real acidity and that kind of like freshness, I suppose, refreshing what they've sort of become familiar with obviously some of the big volume varieties. I mean, in terms of pushing Italian white wines up the kind of more premium level on lists, what's your thoughts there in terms of how easy that is to do, and if so, what are the styles that are going to really help do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I say, it's an ongoing issue really, that I keep trying to fix. So I'm just trying to pull up some numbers in terms of value. The number one thing for us in terms of premium is Cervaro, which we list for 97, which is 100% Chardonnay. We've just listed Lascolca Black, which has some name recognition. Now, I've spoken to customers who know it, but I would say it's just a constant. I think we're going to list in Nama their Foscarino Suave. So there's quite a small handful, in my limited experience, of Italian whites with brand name recognition. And at the same time, you know, something like Valentini is now just, we would never list it because it would just be insanely expensive on our list. Even I was lamenting with someone last week, the Trebbiano from Tiberio, they've got another, the name's gone from my head, which is a similarly savory Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, again is now priced out of Fonte Canale, I think it is now priced out of our range. So I've kind of been trying to do Etna whites. It's a passion of mine, you know, which we can land in the kind of mid 40s. Yeah, we decided not to go with the Timorasso. Yeah, it's a constant challenge. Yeah,
but the nice thing is there's lots of choice. You know, you've got lots of ways to go. I mean, Dana, do you have a kind of a pricing threshold, or is it more the right wine for the right venue, and then try and build your list around it?
I think because the nature of our venues is so different. You know, we were talking before about, yeah, we have different Italian restaurants. We have Radici, which is like a trattoria. We have Fiume, that it's just a mid-range, and then we have Sartoria. So wines will vary there. But what we have noticed recently, there is a tendency towards more premium wines. So people now, after all this recent challenge and nightmare, they've been forced to be indoors. When they come out, they were demanding more premium wines. So we have an increase on demand on top white wines around the world. Even some of the names that Matt was mentioning, some Cervaro, some Kercheval Avatar, some of the Tunina, you know, top wines. It's the same for reds as well. There is an increased demand on Super Toscans and top Barolos, Barbaresco, Brunellos is unbelievable. It seems like since we come out of the COVID, of these people is really into, you know, wanting to treat themselves and they wanting to enjoy nice things. So we have that demand, but it comes to the nature of the restaurant. So we will see that more on a more premium sites and fine dining sites where, you know, fine wines go, you know, the increase has been tremendous. It's been really, really, really big. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Donald, you mentioned earlier, you know, the La Trompette with your big focus on Italy. I mean, where are you seeing with premium Italian white wines in particular outside of Vermentino? Where would Vermentino need to be sort of competing with, as it were?
So it's funny Matt mentioned Inama's Foscarina. I'm just about to start serving that by the glass. There's definitely a slight disconnect between the fresh, fruity Italian white that I think a lot of people expect. But then, oddly, I think I'm quite lucky with La Trompette because people come for a special meal. So people's budgets and expectations of what they want to pay and what they're looking to drink is of a slightly different order. I don't have too many people wanting to just come in and nail like 3 bottles of Pinot Grigio. That thankfully doesn't really exist. Cervaro works well. I tick through Luca Roagna's Soler, so Posh Piemonte Chardonnay. I'm currently doing Cadifrati, Ifrati, Lugana by the glass, just because it seems to work nicely for me this summer. It's a category that I think's got better. I certainly don't remember finding as many delicious wines out with kind of the north. So like Alto Adige, Friuli, like, which has always been for me a kind of strong area for premium whites. There's more interesting things coming from Tuscany than I think I'd have expected to see sort of 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, no, it's an important category and one that works.
Okay. Matt, sure, just a final thought of you in terms of the opportunities for Italian premiums, whites?
Yeah, not that much actually. Out of Alto Adige, I think the one that we have tried in Tuscany, it's Batar from Querciavella. But other than that, I've got listed Nacetta from Piedmont that lists just under 60 pounds. Not very popular, but I'm happy because I found it very interesting. I like to have just bits and pieces that I can offer, but they just add spice to the offering. Yeah, not with whites at Hawksmoor.
Yeah, well, I guess with Vermentino, the fact that Banfi have put such a focus on it is it's clearly a good tick in the box for promoting that in the future. If we're now going to moving on, coming back to you, Igor, we're going to the second wine. This is we're actually coming out of classic Tuscany, but into Piedmont, which is also obviously classic Piedmont, but this is something a bit more offbeat, which I suppose is reflective of what Italy is famous for. Is there's an enormous array of alternative varieties and varieties that perhaps, you know, even those in the wine trade may not necessarily be that familiar with. So do you want to talk us through the second wine here, which is
Yeah.
Alvarazzo based wine.
Yeah, Alvarosa is a grape variety itself. So it was born about 90 years ago by crossing two grape varieties. So apparently in the beginning it was Nebbiolo and Barbera, but it was not Nebbiolo, it was Chartreuse. It's a kind of a very old, ancient grape variety of Piedmont. Yeah, that's the Alvarosa. You know, after that, the meaning of the crossing was to take the best from the two most popular grape variety of Piedmont. So Nebbiolo for high quality, long-lasting wines, very high complexity as well, and Barbera for volumes, color, acidity, and all of this, let's say, business characteristics. So actually, a new grape variety was born with something maybe from Barbera in terms of color. It's very inky, very deep dark, very nice color actually, but almost nothing from Nebbiolo. So Alvarosa is a grape itself. So the reason why we started to produce this wine, La Luz, that in Piedmontese means the light, is because the region, Piedmonte, was giving us the opportunity to, say, revitalize, let's say, some very ancient grape variety like Alvarosa that were going to disappear because nobody was producing. And that's easy to understand because it doesn't make any sense to plant Alvarosa in the Barolo area, either in Barbaresco area. It's not economically feasible. So, but where we are in Strevi is in the southeast part of Piedmont, in the land of Moscato Bianco, of Bracchetto d'Acqui. We were trying, took the challenge, so took the chance to produce this wonderful wine since the beginning. In 2006 was the first vintage we ever produced, and Banfi was one of the first 5 producers to try this new challenge with Alvarosa. And actually, the result was absolutely amazing since the beginning. So a very nice color wine, super good looking, with a little tannic texture, not as tannic as a Barolo, of course, or a Nebbiolo in general, with very, let's say, fruity attitude. The style, and especially the nose, is very, very fruity with some spiciness due mainly to the fruit and not to the oak aging. And then in the end, we found out that by the time passing, the wine was keeping exactly the same. And we did last year, in 2019, at the London Wine Fair, the first vertical tasting of Luz ever made of Alvarosa. So it's only 10 vintages, as you well know. And all of them were looking exactly the same just after 10 years. So probably the aging potential of the wine is even better than we expected since the beginning. But in the end, it's now a kind of very popular wine in our portfolio, because even if it's a niche, it's going into those kind of wines that are absolutely lovable since the beginning and easy to approach, but with a very nice and complex attitude. So it's a wine resulting definitely a little bit softer than a Nebbiolo and good looking as a Barbera, but at the same time, it's not none of that. So in the end, in terms of trade, it's going well because of there's a big demand for those kind of niche wine which are out of the big appellation and undiscovered. So nobody knows Alvarosa, and probably very, very few consumers really have approached this wine. But in the end, as soon as they try it, it is a new discovery. So it's going very well. And I would say with Louis Latour, it was maybe the first real good sales that we had since we began with that.
Thank you, and really well described. Thank you. And is it a style that's becoming more familiar in Italy itself, or is it very in the area? Obviously, it's well known, but is it an area? Is it a region, a style that is becoming more popular in Italy?
Yeah, the style actually is very unique because it's only this wine with such kind of style. So if you go there, Barbera is really closer to Alvarosa, but there are no so many comparisons you can do because it's really a grape itself. So now, if I don't mind, there are something like 9 or 10 producers of Alvarosa in total, and the total production is really less than the smaller appellation we have in Italy. So it's nothing. in the business. So it's difficult to say if there's something close to this style, but actually it's very unique, and the style is Alvarazzo.
Okay. Is it a style that people on the panel are familiar with, or is it, yeah, Nacho, you're shaking your head?
Actually,
or nodding
yeah,
your head.
actually, I was lucky enough to visit Banfi in 2016, so not the first time that I'm trying these wines.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on this?
It is fantastic. I like the juiciness of the wine. It works very, very well with Hawksmoor's dishes, obviously. I remember having this with a ragu, and it was fantastic. I think it offers a lot of punch for the money.
Yeah. So do you have this on your list here, or do you have a similar?
We did have it. We listed Banfi La Luz a while ago, but we don't anymore. At the moment, we're not listing an Alvarazzo in Hawksmoor.
Right. Okay. But do you think there's clearly a potential for it, though?
Yeah. No. It was listed in Air Street for a few years, so it definitely worked. Definitely worked as an entry level Italian wine, and again that you offer something that is probably not very popular, not very well known, but because of the price not being very high, people who are venturers can then just gain knowledge on it, and then they can say that they tried something that almost nobody else has tried, and it's fun.
Okay. Anybody else wants to have a thought on Alvarazzo?
Question for Igor.
Donald, you're always having an opinion.
As usual.
I like it. So I do really quite well with, I always find slightly unusual grape varieties in well-known wine regions are quite an easy sell, particularly if they sit at a slightly more appealing price point. So, you've got people looking at the Piedmont, and perhaps they're being slightly overfaced by like Langhe Nebbiolo starting at sort of 68 to 70, and Barbaresco's Barolos 100 plus. And then you suggest, say, a Pella Verga or a Friesa, and like 50, 55, 60. And so it is, these kind of wines always work very well. There's a sort of, again, there's I'm not quite sure what I think of the Alvarazzo, in that it's got a ripeness. It doesn't feel like it sits particularly like, God, I'm not making much sense here. It's got a fruit character that feels slightly different to what I associate with reds from the Piedmont, and a kind of ripeness of tannins that sort of structurally seems a little bit different. I like it. I just haven't quite worked out what I'd do with it, like what I'd serve it with, how I'd go about suggesting it. Obviously, it's got the interesting story in that it's a modern crossing. So I think there's some story to be told there about it. So it's not like it's an ancient grape variety that's been rescued from near oblivion, like some of the northern Piemontese grape varieties that Uva raras and the like. So there's a slightly different story to this, to the other less well known Piemontese grape varieties that bears investigating, I guess.
Okay, Melody, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would say unique grapes within Italy, at least unknown grapes has always been one of my focus. But when it's come to the balance of the wine list, that's a very sommelier thing. Of course, Piemonte, we have a lot of big space of that, but we have many wines to be filled. We have like classic Barbera, Barolo, Barbaresco, and in order to put another grapes within the same region might be a little bit challenging for me, because there's other region that I would like to focus as well, in order to have the whole balance of the wine list, not to focus on one particular region. And very often I need to sacrifice certain wine, even they might be very unique, very special, or very good price bucket. But I guess when, maybe with a hotel background as well, when my guests looking for certain price range, they might looking for something more premium within the Piemonte region.
Okay. Dana, can I come to you? What's your thoughts on the Alvarazzo in particular, and also just sort of that idea of having a bit more offbeat Italian varieties?
Well, I think this is something quite interesting. Italy has been always a great assessor of multiple different native grape varieties what you can find. And I think this is a perfect example for a wine lover who thought who knew everything about Italy and wanted to discover something new. This is a great alternative. We are focusing, we are about to open a new site in Stratford. And that site will have a much more alpine concept behind. So I'm currently looking into regions with a high altitude nearby to the Alps, and I've been looking into things like this to list there, because you know, there is always an opportunity to surprise people, and I think customers are really used to drink the Barolos, the Barbaresco. They're very familiar with the Nebbiolo, but wines like these, varieties like these, offer an alternative at lower prices, much more affordable, with all the depthness and complexity that you might find in other styles in the area. You know, I was also looking into some Grignolino as well, which is another indigenous grape variety in the area of Piemonte. And I think it's quite interesting. I think the wine itself, it has, you know, that depthness, that sort of a sweet balsamic, that black cherry character, and it's just full of character. But what I like about the wine as well is that there's a plenty of dry freshness behind that will make this wine very enjoyable with food as well, and easy to drink. So overall, I think grape varieties like these, less known varieties, are essential to increase engagement with customers when they're looking for something different and unique, and it also helps to drive sales towards other more premium or different styles of wines within the wine list.
Great, thank you. Well, it's great that you're giving them an opportunity as well, because obviously you've got such a great portfolio. So it's great that you're actually looking to do that rather than perhaps go for the more tried and trusted, which
I think it should be balanced there in between, you know, what it is well known and requested by your customers, but also a small percentage of wines that are unique and different. So you keep the balance on your menu and keep the excitement when your customers come to your venue as well. If they want to try something unique and different, there is an opportunity for them too.
Great. And Matt, what's your thoughts here on the Alvarazzo and more offbeat?
Yeah, I think it's got so much intensity. You know, it just leaps out of the glass at you. I kind of agree with Donald that it might be a bit hard to explain because it has the kind of smokiness and acidity of Barbera, but then the ripe fruit that I would associate more with, you know, Puglia or something. We list a Refosco at about 33 that used to be my house red in a previous restaurant, and that is quite an easy sell because it's fresh and peppery, and you know, something people have never heard of. If there's 14 quid on our list, this would be like mid-50s on the list. It wouldn't be as much as £80, but still at mid-50, you know, you're going to have to do some proper hand selling to kind of explain it. I think it's a bit tricky at that price point.
And have you noticed since opening up that there's been a lot more thirst, as it were, for people looking to experiment more and look for different things on the list?
No, I haven't spotted that. What we had, I can't remember who it was. I think maybe it was Melody who mentioned, or Dana, sorry, I beg your pardon, about customers celebrating. So we've listed a bunch of magnums, doubled magnums, and older vintages, and it's certainly in the first 5 weeks they just flew off the shelves. That's been the big trend, really, is customers wanting large formats, wanting to spend a bit more wanting to get stuck in and celebrate being
Yeah.
able to be sociable with each other again.
Right. Okay. So we're now going to go into a more classic, super classic Italy. Do you want to do the Super Tuscan first or the Brunello, Igor? What's your preference?
Let's say if you're tasting the wines, I would go for Brunello first and Super Tuscan afterwards. Okay. Good.
Okay. Well, do you want to introduce the Brunello then? It's your homeland. What you're famous for. So.
Yeah. So Brunello indeed is our flagship wine. So we're famous for this wine all over the world. It's made by Sangiovese 100%. And there's a lot of research behind the label of this wine. So we've done so many new pioneering, let's say, inventions also in the agriculture, both and winemaking for producing this Brunello. So the style of Brunello usually, when tasting, is a combination of acidity, pale color, and high tannin. So no acidity and no tannins is no Brunello. Definitely, to better understand a Brunello, we absolutely need to match with food, of course, because the food is the best way to approach a very harsh and, let's say, tonic wine texture like this. But the tannins are the first palate cleaner, the first way to help your mouth to be cleaned by everything you have in your mouth. So it definitely was a wine born for food. So I said about innovation and blah, blah, because we are being the first in the area to divide our vineyards in little zones, let's say, and pick the grapes, ferment and age every little zone separately. So potentially we can do more than 25 different Brunello every year, but we are just using 3, of course, but like this one you have in the glass now, only 1, just by blending all of the micro vineyards that we, let's say, selected since the 90s. And of course, to follow up this kind of very, let's say, complicated concept, we have invented a new way of fermenting Brunello by blending stainless steel and oak in the same vats, to, let's say, to ferment every single zone also separately. So it doesn't make any sense to divide the landing zone and not to be able to ferment every little parcel independently. So we invented a new way of fermenting, which is definitely used to ferment and to follow up this concept for every corner of the estate. So potentially, this is getting the best when the vintage is difficult. So for instance, 2014, very rainy, very poor, very cold, or 2017, very hot. So the opposite, where the best way to better understand this kind of zonation concept and constellation of single vineyard, because we were able to take the best only from the small parcels and to maybe eliminate, to declassify the Brunello to Rosso di Montalcino for those that were not fitting our quality expectations. So in the end, our Brunello is always resulting very traditional style. So pale color, high acidity, very high tannins. Tannins are, of course, a little bit harsh and will get softer by the time passing. But this style is definitely very clean and fermented with a lower oxygen content. So in order to not oxidize the wines since the beginning and to not get it Marsala styles since the first year of age. So a very clean and pure Brunello, but made with a very traditional attitude. So in the end, you will find it easy drinking. It's not a matter of muscles, it's not power. It's always about elegance. It's very well balanced. It needs time just to get softer in terms of tannins. But as soon as you match with any kind of food, you will not have any harshness anymore, but the wine will result much easier to drink and softer in the palate. So, and then of course, if you love tannins like myself, like all of Brunello producer, then you will double appreciate by itself, of course, in terms of, I don't know, just by the glass or to enjoy in a fireplace. in the afternoon in the winter. But I would like also to point out that Brunello is not a wine for, let's say, meditation, not at all. It's a wine for every day. It's just complexity and, let's say, harshness, but in a very elegant way. So it's a wine to approach every day with every kind of food, and will surprise you also with salmon or whatever the fish or everything. Is much easier to drink than you expect, just if you understand this kind of balance between acidity and tannins.
Excellent, thank you. Really well described as well. Thank you. So Danny, he mentions it's a wine that can be drunk across the various different cuisines. So for yourself, where do you think Brunello sits within D&D?
Well, for us, Brunello is one of those classic choices. And if you have an Italian restaurant, you must have a Brunello there on your menu. In this case, this is a textbook Brunello for me. It has that, plummy, fleshy red berries and the cedar with plenty of freshness and fleshiness as well. It just, you have that dry tobacco with slightly bitter but also very sandy texture tannins. The thing is also that to drink Brunello, you need to be patient too. And with all that is going on the wine trade and wines moving towards more modern styles, people is not willing to wait the necessary time to drink or understand Brunello sometimes. So that is, I think, but it is the challenge, the patient. And you cannot blame some producers for trying to make this, wines more affordable. But I think there's some of losing a little bit on what it is, the Brunello style, and also competing side by side with, Super Tuscan wines is not helping Brunello to be a little bit perhaps more prominent across a wine list, or as well not demanded by consumers as other styles are. But yeah, definitely Brunello is a must to list there, but maybe not everyone can, have a Brunello that is drinkable or really easy to offer to your consumers for them to enjoy. I think there's a challenge when it comes to Brunello with the age and and when you can drink them. It's beautiful wines, age worthy, but require patience.
Yeah, making sure that you're listing the right wine for the right consumer to be able to enjoy there and then with their meal, rather than having to.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I mean, for your business, I mean, would you pick up on Dana's point there, or what's your thoughts on Brunello and where it sits in with yourselves?
Yeah, it's definitely always been a staple for sure of our premium, probably been the heart of our premium wine offering alongside, Tignanello and Sassicaia. I'm surprised that this is only 2015. I mean, I would have guessed it was older. I think what's lovely about it is, the effect of the oak on the nose and the sweet spice and the balsamic and all the rest of it. That's very appealing. I was again, the kind of ripeness of the fruit comes through. So I'm trying to remember my Brunello maps, but is this from the south of the region, from Brunello, or from the northern part? Igor, sorry.
So we are in the south of the region. So like all of the 14 initial producers of Brunello, so let's say that the appellation consortium was born in that part. And as you say correctly, I mean, that's let's say, in general, the warmest, the hottest part of the appellation. But at the same time, this kind of zonation, canopy management, we invented a neutralizing system also, let's say, to focus more on the quality of Sangiovese, and in a little lower production, but with higher acidity, is making the wine, let's say, affordable since the beginning. And as Diana correctly said, there are no people now expecting Brunello or waiting for Brunello to be developed 10 years before buying. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe in the 80s you could do that, but now you cannot say a consumer please buy a bottle now, keep it in the cellar for 10 years and then drink it. No. So it is better maybe to invest a little bit in to explain what a Brunello should be or it is, and then maybe producing in the, let's say, more affordable way possible. And as you say, 15 luckily was also very lucky vintage, 5-star, very well balanced in terms of weather conditions. So in the end, it seems like it's much more developed than it is, but it is almost the same than it was when it was born. So you made a compliment, actually.
Great.
Excellent. And Melody, can I ask you, is Brunello an area that you need to have on your list, or what's your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely what Diana mentioned earlier, Brunello is like a must, but especially having Italian wine list is a really great classic. But I do also agree that it's just got a bit loss of focus from our guest perspective, because when people are looking for wine from Tuscany, there's quite a lot of option, either from IGT level to a classic Chianti, or even people like to spend a bit more, they have option of probably go straight to either Super Toscan style. Brunello is sitting a nice position in the middle, but very often people who are looking for that price bucket are a bit more narrow than other. What I mean is on the wine list, which is £120 to £150, that range is actually quite narrow. People either would like to pay a bit more for something better quality or more famous name, or something a bit more less for a bit more, maybe they would like to have a couple more bottles instead. I think it's a really great shame and pity over there. I think this is because of the style itself is quite varied. You have something from quite modern to also quite traditional, and very often the guests don't really know what they are getting.
Yeah.
So that is the challenging in here.
Yeah, I guess that I suppose comes back, I suppose, to the challenge of as a buyer, to make sure that you're choosing the right kind of Brunello for your guests. I guess puts a real focus on yourself.
Yes, when I'm choosing, I currently have 4 wine from Brunello on my wine list. So it's from £130 to £380. So that is pretty much quite a wide range. But for 4, I do try to take every single tick box to make sure people who want to drink Brunello do have something suitable for their price bucket.
Okay, interesting. Nacho, can I come to you in terms of what your thoughts are with Brunello?
Very, very similar to what Melody just said. It is, to me, on Hawksmoor, 120 to 150 is a sweet spot for Brunello. And people do have the expectation of Brunello being this super muscular, thick and dark wine. And I just feel that the Brunellos that I like the most have that paleness of color and that have that freshness to balance the tannins that have been mentioned. Yeah, I mean, big names and prices above £300 are there just to make the wine list look pretty, but people rarely go for those. But what I do find is that having a Brunello by the glass on the list is always a big win for everybody.
Yeah,
customers will have a few glasses of Brunello if they don't want to commit for a bottle. They will very happily go and spend 20 quid on one glass. Will not think it twice. It is very recognizable. It's very popular.
yeah, and it has that kind of real, I suppose, kudos factor without, as you say, breaking the bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Donald, that La Trompette, is that you find the same kind of thing, or what?
So I think Melody hit neatly on one of the slight problems Brunello has in a non-Italian focused list, is that the available the available market for £150 plus Italian Tuscan wines very much gets split between the Super Tuscans. The Sassicaia take a lot of that draw. Plus, I feel like Brunello as a style is one that you kind of have to learn to love. If you haven't grown up drinking the slightly austere tannins, the slightly, like they're complex wines, but they're not obvious wines. And so if you've got a population of wine drinkers who've grown up with, you know, sweet oak, ripeness, a Bordeaux style, the more traditional signifiers of premium wines, then Brunello isn't obvious. And, you know, like this wine, it's, you know, it's not a big opulent wine. There's, you know, it's dusty, it's complex, it's interesting. That said, I mean, I've listed the Rosso di Montalcino from Biondi Santi, so similar sort of price area to this, I think, by the glass, and it works well. And it's a wine that has its fans, and people that come in that know Brunello will happily drop, you know, 150, 170, whatever plus on the wines, but they're nowhere near as prevalent, at least in my establishment, as people are prepared to drop that in Bordeaux. You know, probably sell like a fifth of the by volume Sangiovese, premium Sangioveses, as I do to premium Bordeaux's.
Yeah, I understand that, absolutely. Great, okay, well, let's switch our focus onto the Super Tuscans, and this is probably a bottle to put to one side for later as well. But Igor, do you want to talk us through?
Yes. Just to introduce the Super Tuscan, it is nice to, let's say, agree with all the comments about Brunello. Brunello is always, let's say, switching on the conversation, and there are so many topics to cover about Brunello. And indeed, everything was said was absolutely true. So, and it's nice to say that Brunello, as Donald said, is not for beginners. Is maybe a point of arrival for consumers, and indeed need to be appreciated. But at the same time, in this category, it's difficult to play the game against some big appellations like Bordeaux. And I used to say that if you come down to Montalcino and you go to the restaurant buying the most expensive Brunello, maybe you will spend the half of an average Bordeaux in Bordeaux. So that's why the excellence sometimes is to be definitely, I would say, understood in terms of quality. So Italians, of course, is very well famous for also the premium, to be approachable in terms of price. And indeed, we cannot, of course, running or compete with the Premier Grove, the Chateau of Bordeaux, but definitely the high quality in Montalcino is at least the half or even less than the high quality in Bordeaux or Burgundy or somewhere else. So that's why I say, even though the price is not that high, sometimes drinking Brunello is worth it. So, but of course, it has his lovers, is a niche compared with Bordeaux, of course. But anyway, it's a good conversation. I would like to do it maybe with a glass of wine all together now.
Yeah.
So the Sumus, the Super Tuscan we are approaching now, is an IGT. And so to better understand the IGT, you just need to know the wines. It's difficult to say, but it's very, very, say, wide topic to cover. So because in the IGT in Italy, you can find the same blend, Cabernet Sauvignon and Sangiovese, just for example, at 10 quids, or the same blend at 1,000 quids. So the difficulty is to really understand the wine. So Super Tuscan was a nickname given by the American when they were tasting the first Sassicaillas or big blends coming from the Bulgari area, which is not for Sangiovese and is for great varieties, for French varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc. And they were not belonging to any appellation, but they were bold wines, very, let's say, rich, very round and powerful and expensive. So that's why the name Super Tuscan. So now in the Super Tuscan, there's almost everything in Tuscany. But usually I would say Super Tuscan means a blend of Sangiovese with something else, or even without Sangiovese, made in some Tuscan appellation. And why did Banfi produce Summus as a Super Tuscan since the beginning? It's easy to explain. So we have about 900 hectares in Montalcino, and the number of hectares for Brunello or Rosso di Montalcino or Sangiovese in general are very strictly limited by the appellation. But you can grow fantastic grapes also in the known Brunello vineyard. So what would you do with that? So everything. You can do, of course, mass production of Sangiovese or mass blend production for supermarkets or whatever, or you can just take the best from your small production of other grape varieties and blend them. So the Summus, that in Latin name means at the top, so is exactly the top vineyards of our cellar, non Sangiovese, known for Brunello, but just used to produce a very high quality wine, Summus. So indeed, this is a blend of Sangiovese, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Syrah. So Sangiovese is the most, and you definitely, if you taste blind, you will immediately recognize Tuscany. Where in Tuscany is definitely more difficult, but Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah are giving those kind of spiciness and toastiness, a bit of, let's say, black aromas, black currants, some pepper, licorice, some chocolate, that are making the wines even a little deeper color, but at the same time in the mouth is smoother, is more gentle, is less harsh than Brunello, of course, with some very sweet tannins, and in the beginning maybe more approachable than Brunello, of course. But of course, to be the best of our production is even more expensive. So at the same time, it's not Brunello, it's not an appellation, it's an IGT, but it's more expensive because it's just made with the best quality grapes out of the Brunello vineyard. So it's tricky. I can imagine, but it's produced in very limited quantities. It's very few bottles made every year. So it's just to express the potential of Sangiovese and Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah and other grapes in a very famous appellation with the known Brunello vineyard.
Excellent, thank you. And this particular style that we've got in front of us today, is that from in terms of what you're producing? Is this typical of where would you put that in that spectrum you just described?
Yeah, that's very, you know, for Banfi it's typical. We do since 85, so it's very, very, let's say, easy to identify, and it's typical blend of these grapes in Montalcino, even if there are not so many blends in the area. Indeed, this was the first Super Tuscan ever made in the area, and okay, the reason was absolutely easy to understand.
Okay. Melody, is this Super Tuscan? Is this very much an area for you?
Yes, indeed. Sorry, I'm in Italian office. As you might can hear, there's always a lot of Italian noise behind me. Yes, Super Tuscans, Tuscany is a very main focus. I was spending quite a lot of time to source old vintage from a big famous producer. It's quite interesting to see Syrah is part of the blend, and I just saw Lucy share the price range, and it actually make the wine could be quite competitive in our wine list, and it fitting a really good bucket because realistically not everyone want to go for certain very big famous name, which is often might end up with like a few hundred to 1,000 plus. I think for people who been introduced or been heard about it through social media or media, they heard about the Super Tuscans, they might want to try, but doesn't mean they prepare to pay for that amount of money. So with that course, I think it got a lot of potential to raise people interest, to have a taste of introductory of what Super Tuscan's wine should taste like.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of when you have your customers, when the idea of a Super Tuscan, do they exactly know what they want from a Super Tuscan, or are they prepared to try different styles?
I would say both. I can speak for this question with my experience because my hotel is not open yet. So we'll actually know it very shortly. But with my experience, usually guests who are asking for Super Toscans are potentially already have some experience in terms of wine consuming. So they potentially know what they're looking for. They might be would like to more like finding an alternative from a classic Cabernet Sauvignon blend from famous region, either from Napa or either from Bordeaux, and they would like to go for something Italian. So most of them already have some basic education. They pretty much know what they are looking for. Obviously, this fall to another category, which is people who drinking because of the name itself, because maybe Sassicaia, Masetto is a name that they know, they drink it as part of their statement. So it's come to two very different parts.
Thank you. How about you, Dana? Is Super Tuscan an area which D&D concentrates on?
Well, Super Tuscans have been demanded by consumers, and they go to Super Tuscan wines merely by the style. I would say people know what they Super Tuscan tend to be: more richer, fuller, darker, more concentrated styles of wines. And yes, definitely you have to have it there because is a high demand on this style. I think Sumus, as Melody mentioned, it could be one of those entry points Super Tuscans on your menu where you don't have to, to spend a fortune, and you can have a good taste of what the region is like.
Yeah. And for you, is that, I mean, do you find that if you have a ladder of Super Tuscans on your list, does that help in terms of having different price points that people can choose from?
I think so. I think you always have to bear in mind that not everyone has the same budget to spend, and there is people who don't mind about spending thousands of pounds on a bottle of wine, but there's some others who wanted to enjoy wine but can't afford to spend a lot. It should be able to access certain wine styles as well. So I think, yeah, it is important to have different styles and different price points that also backed by the quality behind as well.
Yeah, thank you. And for you, Matt, what's your thoughts on Super Tuscans?
Yeah, I mean, Tig, Sassicaia, Ornellaia are all kind of very important for us. We've kind of flip-flopped with Montesori as well from Castello Nepozzano. It's kind of a funny one because like we list Toriga and it never especially flies, and it's Sardinia's biggest wine. I think we're always slightly on the back foot for things that are IGTs, like wonderful wines that are IGTs. Isn't always the easiest for us. This wine I found incredibly appealing. The nose is just, how could you not love that as a red wine drinker? I thought the tannins, the kind of structure took a bit more of a back seat on the palate, but just very appealing. For us, this would be less than 100 quid on the list. And so I don't think that would be a terribly difficult sell at all for the wine that you're getting for that money. I think it would absolutely fulfill expectations from everyone who bought it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nacho, for yourself and Baltimore?
Not actually. Super Tuscans have always been a hand sell in Baltimore. We have had Super Tuscans from Bulgari from the very, very beginning. And if people don't recognize the name, they don't always feel comfortable going for it. What I do find is that on the entry-level price of the Super Tuscans, around £100, people want to have that familiarity with French varieties. If you mention Cabernet, if you mention Merlot or Syrah, they will find some familiarity to it, and they will probably be more inclined to trying it. When it comes to the big names at higher prices, then it's because people have tried that wine, have heard of it, it's a statement, and they will go for it. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I do think that there's a lot of value to be found on Super Tuscans, and especially on those that blend a little bit of Sangiovese with the French varietals.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say there's a sort of a balance between having actually really good value Super Tuscans, but actually consumers actually preferring to spend even more to sort of make even more of a statement when they're buying a Super Tuscan. Is that something that Donald, I mean, I don't know, what do you do at La Trompette with Super Tuscans?
Super Tuscans, I think Matt kind of touched on where I feel with Super Tuscans, in that I don't think of it so much as a category as a collection of very strong brands. And I think most consumers approaching it go that way. People feel they have an attachment to Sassicaia, to Onla, to Tinanello, and then out with that, you're selling things on the basis of it's similar to something else that you've heard of. So, and it's always, it's an odd way to go about things. They work. There's people always want to spend around that sort of money, and they deliver. They can often be quite reliable in delivering, you know, some of that Tuscan flavour, but with extra kind of body, oomph, and power. But you know, it's I don't feel it's a category that I particularly have to represent. I have the certain brands of Super Tuscans that always work, and that's how it kind of sits in the list.
Yeah, because I know there have people have spoken about Super Tuscans actually having an advantage or benefited from the higher prices from Burgundy and Bordeaux. I know, particularly in the investment market, is that something which has come through actually in restaurants itself, or do you think that's a different kind of conversation? Anybody?
Yes, definitely. But again, that's hitting certain wines rather than it being a category.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and people come in and they will just buy Sassicaia, you know, and they're not people that I feel that I'm going to say, oh, tell you what, do you know what, I've got this excellent, good value, other Super Tuscan style wine. Also, I've just noticed the time.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to shoot.
I'm going to hold up now. So, yeah, well, brilliant. Well, thanks a lot. We did say we'd, in true, do it in a 19-minute format. So I think we're literally just up on the final whistle. So thanks indeed for all your time this morning, and appreciate opportunity from Banfi to share these great wines, and also for Igor for describing them so well. And thanks for all the panel for your great responses, and wish you all the best. Thank you.